Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storyteller Show. And we are taking a little walk down memory lane today in order to take us into the future. I'm so excited to be speaking with Reza Rassool, who joined RealNetworks. How many of you remember RealNetworks back in the day, now called Real? RealNetworks is one of the foundational companies of the internet, of streaming, and I'm really excited to talk with a leader who is looking into the future of all things AI and taking us on a journey about how innovation is getting done in this new world. So Reza Rassool joined Real in 2016, and since then, he has helped guide the technology investments that are pivoting RealNetworks from its historical streaming media roots to become a leader in AI. The SAFR computer vision program focuses on touchless access control and authentication products. And the context platform delivers mission-critical natural language processing for messaging and service operators. And his pioneering developments range from non-linear editing machines, VOD servers, codecs, bionic vision and hearing, digital rights management, game development, and even facial recognition. So Reza is joining us today. He has 67 world patents, numerous papers published, and remains a significant code contributor to this day. So Reza, thank you so much for joining me on the Innovation Storyteller Show today. I hope I got all of that right.
Gosh, that was a word salad of a resume.
So many acronyms in our industry. It's
yes, exactly.
amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Susan, for inviting me on the podcast.
So let's dive in because, moving into this fast moving space, we forget just how far we've come. I think so many people think ChatGPT is the originator of AI, that it is the originator of all things, the epicenter, let's say, at the moment, or at least the conversation around artificial intelligence, and to some degree, even around streaming. You're right. Every day we log into Netflix and chef recommends, right? Netflix recommends something for us to take a look at the very basic level. That's AI at work, right? There's a recommendation engine that's helping us and guiding us. But before we dive into all of that, tell us how you got here, Reza. How did you come to this incredible world at Real?
Well, okay, so my background's been a history of serial startups. When you were writing that press release for RealNetworks, I was one of the founding teams of a company called Widevine Technology. We had this notion that this thing we're doing now, streaming media across the internet, was going to become mainstream, and we wanted to figure out a way to secure it on the internet. And so Widevine, eventually, after a 10-year journey, exited to Google. And so Widevine now secures, I think it's about 40% of the world's over-the-top television that we're watching. So that thing called DRM, digital rights management. After that, I was part of an AI games company that pioneered sort of music creation. Put in a simple prompt and you get a massive orchestration out, much like ChatGPT, where you put in a simple prompt and you get an essay out. But we were doing it for music. That company also exited to Google. And so your question about how did I come to Real, it was after a series of serial startup successes, many failures as well. we shouldn't bury under the carpet, but anyway, so a call from a recruiter prompted the same sort of nostalgic tilted head response that people now get when they hear the name RealNetworks. They think about that sound of dialing up to the internet and so on. And I thought, yeah, Real Networks, is it a thing? Is it still a thing? But the notion of embarking on a mission to help turn around this beloved brand, that seemed a thrilling challenge, and I threw myself into it.
Yeah. And, it's funny, Reza, as you and I were talking, getting ready for this podcast, I was mentioning to you that, as you mentioned here, that I wrote a press release between RealNetworks and Akamai Technologies, which is, the backbone of the internet for so long, and was a client of mine back in my public relations days, announcing that, this incredible backbone was now going to be made available to RealNetworks to really drive streaming opportunities in a way that had never happened before. Because we were remembering back in 2000, last mile connectivity issues were plaguing us, right? How were we ever going to get information, photos, really heavy content to download quickly, much less stream, right? In the age of Napster and so many different streaming services that were just getting off the ground, and Real was really at the forefront of that movement. And so, yeah, it's just amazing, this trajectory that you and I have been watching over time in this space, and also hopefully contributing to in a way that's making a difference now.
It's been a while, hasn't it? Yeah. So
Yeah.
now streaming has become ubiquitous. It's the main way in which we not only get entertain ourselves, but it's the way we work. Look, along came the pandemic, and it accelerated this notion that you don't need to be in an office to be productive. And especially in the line of what we do in software development, you can really do it anywhere. Yes, for the small group of people that need to work on, let's say, prototype hardware, and there's only a few instances of that, yes, they need to come into the lab. For the online, for the face-to-face collaboration, you see, I've got whiteboards over here, and I try and recreate that sort of face-to-face whiteboard experience. I don't think we've got adequate tools. I think there's still some work to be done there, but for the large part, streaming has become a fact of life now for us.
Yeah. Well, the company's undergone a lot of changes, right? Real just went from public to private. Tell us about that transition.
Indeed, yeah. We started the new year as a private company. So Real has gone through a transition. Prior to that, it was a public corporation that was not scoring well according to Wall Street metrics. Real was a collection of separate businesses that were pursuing separate missions and weren't well integrated. And that was the case when Rob Glazer came back to Real. He had a time away from the company, and he came back to Real, and Real was in a really unhealthy state. It was not well coordinated. It was burning cash, and it didn't have a coherent story. And it's very difficult to turn around a behemoth that is generating cash, it's generating profits, but how to turn it around and get it in a coherent, heading along a coherent path. And so when he came back, he hired a whole raft of new executives, myself included, and the mission was to help turn around Real Networks. So for me, it wasn't as a CTO, the job of creating new foundational technologies to power this turnaround was an exciting challenge. The inventory I took of the global sort of tool belt of technical assets that we had showed that we had no AI. So it didn't take much rocket science to say, hey, okay, let's bet on AI and place a few bets. And before we knew it, we were doubling down on computer vision and natural language processing. And those now are powering two growth divisions. One is SAFR, SAFR, secure, accurate facial recognition. We turn out to be the world's best for live video facial recognition. So for real time, at the edge facial recognition, I think we're the best in town, according to NIST metrics. Okay, so on the other side, the other division you mentioned, context, is conducting mission critical natural language processing. So we are in the nation's SMS pipeline. We route SMS messages between carriers, and we process those messages at blisteringly fast speeds. Billions of messages go through this system, and we're analyzing them for spamminess. So your mobile phone, like your landline, became difficult to use because it just became clogged up with robocalls and so on. Cell phones, there's a lot of spam on mobile phone networks, and we're sitting in the network, and we use AI models to classify messages and allow the carriers to then decide whether to filter the message or not. So those are the two broad things. The big theme around this transition is AI.
And I mean, I think every industry is starting to look at itself, recognizing it as the game changer. Do you think it is what the internet was for us in, 95 or in 2000, or do you think it's something different?
No, I think it is. I think it is that. In fact, there's the pundits look at new technology and there's a knee-jerk reaction whether to hype it or whether to stoke fears around it. So AI is one of those technologies where they kind of say, do we hype it or do we stoke fear around it? Because fear actually gets you more clicks than the optimistic, rosy-eyed view of the future. So my thought, especially around these large language models, the large language models are trained on the existing repository of human knowledge, at least human knowledge as written down online and publicly available. So it's what I'm seeing is a gold rush, because now for the first time we have a way of mining that knowledge in a very efficient and conversational way. This is not like a Google query. This is not like a query where you put in a query string and you get back a number of pages. No, you're now having a conversation that maintains context, and you build on that. And so your research and your mining into this repository of human knowledge is way more efficient. So I see now the capability of a new generation being able to stand on the shoulders of the previous generations. Okay, and this is maybe the first time it's happened. 2022 was actually a pivotal point where I think one of the universities, was it Stanford, said that ChatGPT actually scored higher on the SATs than the majority of their intake of undergraduates.
Wow.
So that was very telling. But then what they did was they took the lower scoring cohort, gave it ChatGPT and said, okay, can you retake those SATs? And the combination of those low-scoring students plus the AI actually got them a score that was higher than the high-scoring cohort.
Whoa.
What does
What
that
does that mean? I mean, what is that? What is that
mean?
telling us?
Right. That tells us that, you know, I'm not going to lose my job to to AI, but I'm going to lose my job to another candidate who's using AI. So you better get familiar with the tools and use it, wield it to your advantage. Okay.
So, you know, as you're thinking about this, right, and Real is kind of shifting, you're in the middle of this rejuvenation of the brand, right, of the company changing. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've managed to hold on to innovation in the midst of, you know, changes like AI and ChatGPT being upon us? And where is your focus when you wind up seeing, you know, a company that's going from public to private? Can you tell us some of the innovation work that you're working on and how you're doing it?
Well, I'll reflect on the role of the CTO, of the corporate level CTO. For me, that role has changed. You know, when I joined, I inherited an org that reported to me of numerous engineers around the world. I had a large team in Beijing doing work on the codec, a next generation codec. I had other teams developing mobile apps for mobile operators, and slowly I divested, or I delegated and shed the sort of engineering manager responsibility of the CTO and focused more and more on innovation. So RealNetworks, despite its original innovative roots at the turn of the millennium, you know, the dot-com era, had really, you know, I think largely while Rob was away, had really lost its innovative streak. But the DNA was still there, but there were other motivations for what the company actually did. So that spirit of product creation and innovation had somehow been lost, and we had to try and rekindle that and come up with ways in which we can get this disparate assemblage of members of staff to talk to each other, first of all, get them to participate in innovation. So I created these sort of almost gamified, very forced and deliberate innovation workshops. So I called them Think Days. And so I requested budget for a Think Day. And exec said, "What is it?" Well, I said, we're all gonna take a day off and just think about new products and innovation. Okay, it seemed a bit vague and woolly. And I spitballed the idea with a few like-minded people at RealNetworks, and soon we came up with a format of Think Day. And it involved getting a collection of volunteers from around the global RealNetworks family to come and join us for a day, which turned out to be 2 days, and later on 3 days, and even 4 days, where we formed in little startup teams and ideated on a product, created a pitch. We held a Shark Tank type of evaluation of it at the end and gave away prizes. And this thing became so popular, it was oversubscribed each year. We ran Think Day for 4 years. We ran a hackathon. I also then involved external entities. We involved the University of Washington, where we sponsored 3 capstone projects. So you've got to find ways of deliberately spurring innovation, because I tell you, it's not going to come from business as usual, from just cranking the handle and optimizing your P&L. It's not going to happen. The typically, and I don't want to use this to, carry on.
Can I just ask you, Reza, is that, so the desire there is to kind of reawaken that, DNA that you mentioned earlier, that there's a desire to say, okay, how can we get people thinking in this innovation headspace again, as opposed to just being focused on our quarterly numbers, trying to
Exactly.
dig it out, just get it done kind of thing. There's a waking up. And I know we've had certainly other guests on the show who talk about enlivening the employees to kind of resuscitate this feeling around, thoughtfulness and looking ahead to the future, and really what our capacities are in ways that have been diminished over time. Is it this desire to kind of bring all forces of human creativity to bear on the problem?
Right, because all the metrics of performance, none of them include coming up with new ideas and innovation. It's all about optimizing execution and maximizing profits and so on. It's, the term bean counter is used disparagingly. I'm in the sort of spirit of storytelling. I imagine the parable of the bean counter that comes to the coffee plantation after the harvest and congratulates the farmer on a great year and says, "Now we just need these beans. Okay, those bushes over there and all of that land, that's just extra cost. Let's just dispense with all of that. We don't need that. But could you just get us the beans?" Okay, and that is the blinkered thinking of, okay, well, let's just execute on our current roadmap and optimize that, or let's serve our existing customers and just deliver those products. That's great. What happens the following year and the year after that? If you're thinking about longevity and you're thinking that, corporations, companies are supposed to be entities that persist forever, then you've got to be thinking about what is Rob Glazer calls it looking around the corner. So the rest of the organization is cranking the handle and making sure the trains run on time. You need to be looking around the corner, and so I take that as my my charter, and it's.
Yeah, we love Rob Glazer on this show too. He's such
a. So Susan, you talk to lots of companies, and how do they do innovation? Because I'd love to know.
It's so fascinating. We're about 100 episodes in on the podcast, and if you've been listening, you've probably heard every conceivable way to do innovation on this from this show. But a couple of ways, just for our listeners, some of which may be new to the show, there are a couple of different ways. We've had great experts on who do open innovation, right? Who say, we're going to crowdsource great ideas, whether it's from the employees or from outside of the organization. And I encourage listeners to listen to the podcast with Steve Rader, who tells a fantastic story of how a potato chip factory was trying to find the best way to get the excess grease off the potato chips before they went into the bag. And no one could figure it out. And it turned out when they opened the query to the larger audience outside of the potato chip factory, it turned out that a violinist was one who knew that the resin on the bow comes off when you stroke it at very high rate of speed. So it turned out that shaking, right, using actually sonic waves to shake the potato chips would allow the grease to drop off.
Oh my.
Probably something you probably would never hire a sonic engineer to figure out the exact decibel you needed in order to get the excess grease off a potato chip, but it's there. There are some organizations that host these kind of innovation sprints or contests every year. And some of them are directed by, let's just get blue sky thinking out there. Let's think about all the things that we could do. Others are highly directed to say, here are the 3 biggest problems going on for either our clients or for us. Let's figure out how to solve them. Or third, some organizations will say, we have a desire to create the #1 product. We have a desire to remove the greatest cost out of the organization. Or the last is, we want to make customer service better than it's ever been before. Now let's figure out how to do that. Go off on your own ways and figure out how do we get to those answers. Take any means to figure it out. And that can be inside the organization or outside. Steve also told us on the show that NASA, when it was deciding how to drum up excitement around its 50th anniversary, they wanted to redesign a logo in honor of that milestone. And NASA has great graphic designers, but they decided to open it up to the whole world. And it turned out it was a couple from Australia that wound up redesigning that logo. And so, there are people who have a deep, deep love for what we do. And if we allow them to express it, we can find whole new ways of doing that. That we never thought possible. And so I think open innovation is a way to do that. And then lastly, there are some organizations that wall off the innovation team and put them on an island, knowing that the larger entity will absolutely eat them for breakfast if they let them loose in the machinery. And so they're very specific and very controlled about when innovation gets let into the larger group. And I think you and I were talking about this, right? That famous quote that says, an optimist designs the airplane, the pessimist designs the parachute, right? And so that quote, it reminds me of just when we decide to bring new ideas to the fore, when we want the critics and when we want the creators to be involved in the innovation sphere. Yeah.
So the you're absolutely right that the innovators, that innovative spirit can be a chaotic influence on a smooth running organization, especially when you are trying to co-opt members of your existing company. So if you don't have a separate think tank that is fully staffed, then your next option is to say, well, I'm gonna use part of the brain power of the existing company. That could be a disruptive influence, and because the whole nature of innovation is disruptive. It is trying to rethink either the way we're doing things or existing products. So there is an anecdote where one business guy says, while you're trying to further your $1 billion idea, don't destroy my $100 million business. So you've got this big idea, but you're trying to do it within an organization that has got a business going. So these things run counter to each other, and as a CTO or head of innovation, you're often going cap in hand to various business owners, P&L owners, scrounging for resources in order to further an idea. So especially in the current climate, I'd say be humble, be sensitive to the executive partners, the business leaders who've got numbers to make for that quarter. So don't go disrupting that. You're always going to be a cost. You're always going to be a cost burden. Innovation is always a cost. And
at first, right?
At first, exactly. Yeah. At first. Later on, it starts generating revenues and starts being the driver for the business and overtakes the previous generation of products, the legacy products. So I don't lose heart. You're also going to be wrong many times. Having been through the startup world, there's VCs count themselves lucky if they get 1 in 10. Try and fail fast. All of those guiding principles. Fail fast, be humble, try and beg, borrow, and steal resources, try and keep your cost footprint really low, stay below the radar, because that'll be the first thing that gets cut, when times become hard. And well, thankfully, we've been able to do this through very turbulent times, and we've been able to maintain a streak of innovation over the last 7 years, at least, coming up for my 7th anniversary at RealNetworks.
Wow. So, to this point, though, I think, some of the points that you're making about fail fast and so forth, there's always like a hint of, will my culture accept me if I fail? And I feel like the greatest innovation cultures, at least from the guests that have been on the show, whether it's Tesla or Corning or Indeed or TD Ameritrade, they are willing to take the risk, and the executive team allows for some elasticity around failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if and only if the failure can be redeployed into the learning for the next new thing. And I'm curious if you have this experience about whether or not innovators are good at shaping the narrative around, okay, that didn't work, but here's what we learned, and we're deploying it in the next thing that we're trying.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. It's a thing that I struggle with all the time. Is how do you build a narrative around your failures to cast them or extract some sort of benefit out of it? And I think the lessons learned are great. It's cold comfort though when it's a hard dollar amount, where you say, well, yeah, we maybe stayed with this project a year too long, and so when we reflect on it, that was a couple of million in payroll that we could have upon reflection we could have saved or redeployed in another area. Those are tough, very quantifiable lessons. I'm trying to trying to remain positive. Just looking back, but both of us are of a vintage now where we can look back, and you're not only counting successes or failures, but you're looking for a consistent narrative. You should be looking, I think, for a North Star, a guiding theme behind what you're about what you're doing. And I think that always helps you in picking ideas. I'm rambling on. I wonder if that made sense.
No, it definitely. And, I think, bringing it back to the conversation we had at the beginning of the show is, as we need to iterate and integrate new technologies that wind up coming to us, what do you think is going to be the impact of something like a ChatGPT, either, and I use that name broadly, but AI, and there's been so much hype and so much fear. Do you think that this next iteration of companies and opportunities, the innovation that we're going to see, is going to, where's it going to shift us, do you think?
Yeah, I actually have an optimistic view of it. I think that we are going to be the better for it. I think it raises all boats. It is a technology that allows us to stand upon the shoulders of previous generations. because all of that learning we can now mine in easier ways than we could before. Okay, so that's one thing. Let's talk about the fears first. It's important. In fact, as Edward de Bono and I've this shows our age as well. Ed de Bono, the guy that coined the phrase lateral thinking, came up with a way of looking at issues, and he calls it the 6 thinking hats method. I urge innovators to go and have a look at that method and bone up on Bono. But he says the way to look at issues, especially across a team, is to put on the same hat simultaneously. So the 6 thinking hats, can't recall what they all are, but there's the hat of the optimist. I think that's the yellow hat. So you get everyone to put on the yellow hat, and you say, okay, now look at.
I looked them up when you told me about them. So there are 6 thinking hats for my listeners who don't know them. There's the blue hat, which is process, the white hat, which is facts, the green hat is creativity, the yellow hat is benefits, and the black hat are cautions.
Cautions, the risk analyst hat, that would be, and sometimes members of your team or colleagues habitually only have one hat on, and they think that that's the only hat they're allowed to have. Like the CFO would have the black hat on. I'm the hat of caution. I'm Dr. No. The buck stops here, and you're going to have to get me to approve. So what you try and do is encourage participants in decision making to all put on the same hat at the same time and said, let's look at this issue, not personalize our position, but let's look at this issue through the persona of the optimist. So you've got the yellow hat on. Okay, let's look at AI. What can AI do for us? And you start thinking about all the positive things and enumerate all of those. And then you say, okay, let's put on the red hat, which I think is the gut response hat.
Feelings hat, right?
Feelings hat. How does that make me feel? What's my gut response to it? You mentioned, okay, so the black hat, the caution, the risk analyst hat. Yes, let's have a look at that, and let's all look at it through that perspective. And that allows you to harness the mixed feelings, the mixed inputs, the nuanced inputs of an entire team, and you come back with much better decisions than you would have before. There's less ego involved in the decision making. The decisions become less personalized, so that it's less adversarial in a boardroom or even in your development team. And so I'm using that in a brainstorming workshop. You can amalgamate this with brainstorming. So you have brainstorming on the front end, and you have the 6 thinking hats methodology on the back end of it to help you pass through all of those multiple ideas that came in from the brainstorming. And that, I think, is cool. So your original question is, what's my take on AI? I try and look at it through multiple hats. I reflect on the Monty Python Life of Brian sketch, where they are sort of berating what the Romans have done for them, and then some of the guys said, well, actually, they did bring us the aqueducts, and they started putting on different hats, and eventually you start seeing an issue from multiple points of view, and you get a much more nuanced reaction. So I haven't given you an answer. What is my take? I feel optimistic. I'm not blind to the dystopian fears around AI, how it's going to change, it's going to take jobs away. Yes, it is. Steam power took jobs away, changed the employment landscape. Electrification changed the employment landscape. The computers, the internet changed the way labor, where humans find their niche and where humans can express their value beyond technology. That's always going to be a challenge. And so where is the role for humanity, for sentient, critical thinking beings? Where is that role? Well, I think that is the human challenge. It's to find how we can always be pushing the boundaries, how we can do things that a ChatGPT can't do. ChatGPT is now a repository of knowledge, of historical knowledge. ChatGPT can't create new knowledge. That's for us to do. It's merely a stenographer for what previous generations have done. It's not a critical thinking, sentient entity.
No, and more than that, even, and just thinking about what my listeners are considering when they're thinking about incorporating AI strategies, is that for so many of us, even looking at ChatGPT, we don't know the sources that they're deriving their outputs from. Right. Those are black box technologies. We don't know what the ethics are. We don't know what the selection process is. We don't know what the algorithm is sourcing for us. So yeah, you can come up with top 10 blog posts, for your social media calendar that might be coming up soon, right? Or what's the next movie to recommend? But it would be very easy to manipulate some of the sources of information that AI systems are drawing from, and then giving us outputs that we may not want.
Well, you've seen quite a bit of, maybe you've seen online my writing on ethical AI, on bias in AI, and so on. I've been exploring specifically ChatGPT, prompted by my wife. Actually, my wife's a professor of English, and she was doing final year grading at the end of last year, and noticed some of these papers had curiously similar tracts in the text. And I said, okay, let's take your essay prompt and put it through ChatGPT. And lo and behold, you could see within about 5-10 minutes, I could have a conversation with ChatGPT, come back with a few paragraphs of text, many paragraphs of text that I could put together. And she said, yeah, I would have probably given that an A-, maybe B+ grade. And I hadn't read the text. So it's quite clear that there's things that it can do that are worrisome, but I've also been exploring the areas where it is deficient. It's trained on largely Western text repositories, on training sets, the Common Crawl, I think all of Wikipedia, blog posts, a whole raft of publicly available scholarly journals and papers. It can even, so I was asked to write an after-dinner speech for our executive dinner, and I said to ChatGPT, I need to write an after-dinner speech on the subject of generative AI. And so it cranked out a 20-minute speech. It was very bland and soulless and equivocal
jokes in there
and mealy-mouthed. So I in my handout for the speech, I said, here's what ChatGPT wanted me to say, but here's what I'm actually going to say. So then afterwards, I thought, as a joke, and for my wife, I thought, okay, let me render this entire 20-minute speech in the form of a Shakespearean sonnet. So she's an English professor, and it bangs out a Shakespearean sonnet with the iambic pentameter and the rhyming structure and a beautiful rhyming couplet at the end that if Shakespeare had penned, no one would have argued with. And that was great. Okay.
But you know what? Shakespeare would have said it was mealy-mouthed and dull and not nearly with the flourishes that he would have assigned to it, right?
So then I said, can you render it in the form of a haiku? And no, it failed. It gave me 6 lines of poetry that were like really long. And I said, and then I asked ChatGPT, do you know what the schema is for a haiku? And it said, yeah, it's 3 lines of poetry, 575 syllables. So I said, okay, given that definition, can you redo your response? Then it gives me 4 lines of poetry, not and with many, many syllables, like dozens of syllables on each one. So it's quite clear that, first of all, it is steeped in Western literature, not so hot on Eastern literature, great, but it understands words. Words are the atoms of its learning model. It doesn't understand the syllable structure of words. Great. Okay, so that's one area of deficit. As you go and have these conversations, and I urge anyone to do that, have conversations, you also see that while the GPT large language model is very powerful, and if you use that in its raw API form, you'll see the power in it, ChatGPT has been put on rails so as not to offend. And it doesn't take a position on anything. It doesn't express an opinion. Even on things that you think are objective truth, it'll give you both sides of the story. I think so that's what gives it that mealy-mouthed type of response. Even on things that you think are kind of obvious in terms of history, and I'll urge you to go and play with it on that. That's actually the answer for the English department, because when in my wife's job, she wants her students to write opinionated essays that express a strong opinion, but backed up with facts. So take a position and back it up with facts. It appears that you won't get that, at least in the vanilla, easy querying. So I think it's, I think that's also the position that we as humans have. We will have the ability to apply critical thinking and to adopt positions, providing we can support it with facts. Anyway, I'm ranting on.
It's really, you know, I think taking us back to that place where we remember being in English class, we remember, you know, like trying to drum up these ideas. For some of us now, our work does entail a lot of creativity. And certainly if you work in innovation, trying to come up with new ideas within the structure, whether it's iambic pentameter or haiku, right? We all have boundaries that we have to work within. And whether it's budget, operations, you know, geographical borders, whatever it may be, it's a reminder for us of how we can play and maybe play with our own human creativity to get to those answers. So speaking of which, I'm gonna take you now, Reza, to this to our hot seat questions. So these are questions I ask everyone who comes on the show. If you had to choose the most incredible innovation in human history, which would you say it is?
Gosh. You know, you can go back to prehistory and say, well, fire was pretty hot. So to speak.
That was awful, by the way. That's a terrible dad joke.
There's a terrible bad dad joke. The wheel. You know, I think the book was pretty radical when you think about what existed prior to that collection of pages that were stuck together, bound with glue. What existed before that was a scroll, so you could only look through text serially. The sort of codex type of way in which you could access knowledge was great. The indexing of it was problematic. So then when you look at the trajectory of how humans can access the knowledge of their ancestors, I'm interested in following that path. So the indexing of those books improved, and so search engines allowed you to get inside the book, get quickly search, query for something, although they're currently purely doing text matching. It's not really tell me the point where the plot turns in the book. No, there's no search engine that's going to be able to find that. So my thought is that in higher levels of natural language processing, ones that have memory, like ChatGPT, you want to be able to get that sort of meta level of understanding and query of what's going on. So I'm excited about those developments. Gosh, okay, I've ranted on for a bit.
So that is so the book is our greatest innovation of all time. If you had to join an innovation team, which would it be?
So separate from my day job, I've been, my original study at King's College was in physics, and I left that establishment dissatisfied with the state of physics. The place that it currently is in, it's in a rut, and it's been there for about a century, and it's stuck in a mire of groupthink and is unable to move things forward. We've got physics is a loosely coupled collection of theories that actually contradict each other, and no one has been able to move things forward. So I would like to get together with a group of innovators that are brave enough to take physics to the next level of unification and simplification, and making it accessible to lay people. At the moment, we're in a state of thinking which is reminiscent of the epicycles, the Ptolemaic epicycles of when we believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. And now to explain all of the bizarre motions of the heavenly bodies, they weren't going in a circular or elliptical paths, that they were actually appeared to be at some times of the month precessing and going around. But no, we can explain it with cycles upon cycles. They're called epicycles. And this is the way that physics is now explaining itself, by just adding more fudge factors. And unfortunately, there are careers, and there's government funding, and there's a huge behemoth of inertia invested in the existing mainstream collection of theories. And that is where I think we need to make a big breakthrough. So in my spare cycles, my mind goes to that part of the world. And I'm not sure how it impacts. Maybe AI helps us there, don't know. But I think it's, I think when we do make a breakthrough, that'll be another sort of gold rush of benefit, the same thing that the internet gave us, the same that AI is giving us now.
Well, this has been fantastic, Reza. Thank you so much for joining me on the Innovation Storyteller Show. If people want to get in touch with you, Reza, what's the best way to do that?
You can email me, Reza@Real. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I could easily suck the oxygen out of a room as I just did.
Nonsense.
And yeah, find me. I'm not invisible online. So look forward to hearing from you.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much.
Reza Rassool from Real, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.